Good afternoon. Happy Savage Saturday. Keepers of the Cash. Gary B., the Casual Comic Guy here. And we're here with Savage Saturday Comic Review, episode 135. And this is part 2 of our origin story of Dark Agnes de Chastillon. And hopefully you enjoyed part 1. And when we left Dark Agnes, after having escaped her father and her would-be husband that she was sold to by her father, and her vile family altogether, she had ran into Etienne, and he helped her out, and they were on their way to a tavern in a village, and she was riding along with him, and we left them approaching this village with her on horseback with Etienne. For more of part 1, just go back a week, watch episode 134. It'll catch you up with the story. A very savage beginning for our heroine, and right now she is just surviving. And we're going to get more into her origin right now. We're going to pick up where part 1 left off and continue forward. All right, so part 2. So the story opens with Agnes sitting on the horseback behind Etienne, and they're approaching a tavern. And it says, "It was midday when we halted at a tavern, a woodland inn, lonely and isolated. The host came forth, a stooped and hulking lout, wiping his hands on his greasy leather apron, bobbing his head." And it says, Dark Agnes Part 2, Knave's Fingers. And Etienne got off the horse, and Agnes is also dismounting, and Etienne looks to the tavern keeper and says, "We need food and lodging. I am Gerard de Bretagne of Montauban, and this is my younger brother. Tend to my horse and set a roasted fowl on the table, host." And remember, he is dressed her up in boy's clothes as to disguise her identity. And then we go to the inner monologue again of Dark Agnes. It says, "The innkeeper's gaze lingered on me, causing me to believe my disguise was not as complete as I'd hoped, for the long glance was not as a man gives a lad." And once inside, we see Etienne, who is disguising himself and calling himself Gerard, speaking. He says, "Bring bread, meat, 2 flagons of wine, and as many kisses as you have in your ample storerooms, my lady." And he's talking to one of the waitresses there. And Dark Agnes continues her inner monologue. She goes, "Something passed between Etienne and a fat, gross man, with his belly bulging over his belt. A quick look, some understanding, then silence between them. I made little of it then. I fell to avidly, but Etienne ate little. He toyed with his food, though he drank a fine lot, with his gaze shifting from the fat man back to me." And then Etienne says, "By Saint Michel, in all my life I never saw a woman drain a flagon like that. You will be drunk, girl." To which Agnes replies, "You forget, I am a girl no longer." And Etienne continues with the tip of the hat as they both rise. He goes, "That was much needed. We ride on," Agnes tells him. And he goes, "We rest here until morning. I think it will be safe enough." And Agnes replies, "As you like. I am utterly in your hands, and wish to do only as you bid in all things." So still a little rough around the edges. She still is learning her way around things. And Etienne looks to the tavern keep and says, "Host, my brother is weary. Bring him to a room where he can sleep. We have ridden far." To which the tavern keep says, "Ay, your honor." And we go back to her inner monologue, and she says, "The host mumbled, rubbing his hands together, for Etienne had a way of impressing common folk with his importance, as if he were a count at the very least, but more of that later." The keep says to Agnes, "Just this way, this way. Perhaps you'd like to go up the ladder first, lad." She goes, "Lead the way yourself if it's you who knows the way." So they go up, they're in the loft, and the tavern keep says, "Here we are, not fit for a king, but at least for a courtier, I'd say. We do quite well for the woods, quite well. I'm sure you'll be well pleased." In which she replies, "It will suffice." And we go to her inner monologue. Once again, she says, "Sad as it was, the room was still more elaborate than anything to which I had ever been accustomed, though I noted there was no bolt to the door from within, and like that not. Whether it was the wine or unsuspected weariness, I fell asleep before I knew it, and slumbered long. My sleep was slight, for I remembered Etienne's words, 'Sleep, brother.' he had said for our host's benefit, but he'd whispered in my ear with, I trust him not. He will move on you as soon as night falls. Rest, meantime, I will come for you at dusk. And then we got our first 2 pages done. We're going to show you that, although I've been showing you them over here. And the second part of our tale is underway. Agnes is still quite fresh from being away from home and trying to cut out a new life for herself. Her inner monologue continues with, what woke me was the gentle opening of the door. No one spoke, but something moved in the darkness. I heard a beam creak and caught the sound of suppressed breathing. And she shoots up in bed. She's got a look of surprise on her face. She says, is that you, Etienne? Etienne, is that you, Etienne Villiers? And there's no answer. And she gets out of bed with her knife. And says, the only reply was that of breath hissing softly between teeth. Then the beam creaked again, and a stealthy shuffle receded. I heard the door open and close softly, and knew I was once more alone in the room. That had not been Etienne coming for me as he had promised, but who had tried to creep upon me in the darkness. I could hear someone moving across the room below, fumbling at the outer door. And as she's going down the ladder, she sees, she says, the innkeeper, as she spies him leaving the inn. And it shows her pursuing him outside, dagger still in hand. She says, Gods, fat man, I could play a lute and you'd hear nothing over the sounds of your old huffing breasts. And then her inner monologue continues, and she says, I strained my eyes in a dim starlight, and presently he came forth leading a horse. He did not mount the beast, but led him into the forest, showing every evidence of a desire for silence and secrecy. And now the sounds of a horse galloping. What means this? Where are you going in such secret haste, fat man? Agnes says. And then back to her inner monologue. All I could think of was that somehow he recognized me, knew of me, and was riding to bear word to my father. I had to speak with Etienne, seek his wise counsel, but could find no one but the serving wench asleep on the floor. Then from somewhere there came a faint, indistinct mumble of voices. And she says, eh? And we'll show you those. And again, the art is very, very good. Just beautiful art. Setting up the scenes well. And as we turn our page, we continue with Dark Agnes's inner monologue. She says, I glided out the back door and stole around the tavern. Silence hung over the black-shadowed forest, except for a faint cry of a night bird and the restless movement of the great stallion in his stall. And she peers through a window in the tavern, and she sees Etienne at a table, and she goes, Etienne? And back to her inner monologue, she says, I halted suddenly, hearing my name spoken, and nestled close to the wall, listening shamelessly. I heard the quick, clear voice of Etienne and the rumble of another. And Etienne is talking to the innkeeper and says, she claimed her name was Agnes de Chastillon, but what does it matter what a peasant wench calls herself? Is she not a handsome baggage? And the innkeeper says, I've seen prettier in Paris, eh? And in Chartreuse, too. And Etienne says, pretty? The girl's more than pretty. There's something wild and untamable about her. She would renew the youth of the most jaded debauchee. Look, Thibault, I'd not be offering you this prize, were it not that the risk is too great for me to ride on to Chartreuse with her. I am suspicious of this dog of an innkeeper, too. I'm sorry, yeah, that wasn't an innkeeper, it was the guy here. Sorry about that. It says, quite rightly, for if he recognizes you as the man for whose head the Duc d'Alencon yearns, and Etienne says, be quiet, fool. That's another reason I must be rid of the wench. I was surprised into telling her my true name. But by the saints, Thibault, my meeting with her was enough to jolt the calm of any man. That red hair, that dagger. She seemed more demon then. And then the guy he's meeting with says, ha, a country wench in the woods frightens Etienne Villiers, a rake among rakes. You're weaving a romance about a dirty country jewel, come to the point. And Etienne says, I have come to it. I'd intended taking her on Chartreuse and selling her to a brothel keeper, but I realized my folly. I'd have to pass too close to the domain of the Duc d'Alencon, and if he learned I was in the land, he'd pay high for the information. He dares not arrest me openly, but a dagger in the dark, a shot from the bushes, and before he continues his speech, it shows us Agnes outside. She's looking down, and there's just sheer disappointment on her face at being betrayed by Etienne. The other guy continues, I know, I was a fool to come this far east. But you could take the girl to the Chartreuse without fear, give me the price I ask, and she's yours, as he continues his sale of her. And the guy he's talking to says, your price is too high. Suppose she fights like a wildcat. And to which Etienne replies, that's your lookout. Can't you tame a wench? Though I warn you, there is a fire in the girl. Didn't you say your companions lie in a village not far off? Get them to aid you. And to which the guy he's selling her to replies, well, I'll take a chance. After all, that is what a man must do. And outside, her face is still downtrodden, and you hear her say, I heard the clink of silver coins on the table, and the sound was like a knell to me. And indeed it was, for there died the girl I had been, and in her stead rose the woman I have become. A drink to the real bargain, I heard Etienne say. Then I must ride, when you go for the wench. And then we have this vision of her just approaching the door with her dagger drawn. And all this, man, you are just feeling so bad for Agnes. So the innkeeper had been making his way there somewhere. He rode off on a horse. And she heard Etienne talking to this guy and selling her. And now there's some intrigue about Etienne being in trouble with this Duke d'Alencon and a price on his head. And Agnes, feeling betrayed, is entering the bar, the tavern. The door swings open and she's coming in with her blade. And he's like, Agnes, wait, girl. She goes, you filthy dog, you swine, swine, swine. And she plunges the dagger down and she cuts the throat of the guy he's with. Only luck saved Etienne in those opening moments. Luck and my own blind fury. If he'd been closer to the door, he'd have suffered the fate of the gross pig of a man known as Thibault. And you see Thibault get slashed across the throat, and he's done. And Etienne grabs her, and he's pinning her to the table. She's like, let me go. He goes, so, you can kill me. No, you dark bitch. I don't want your life, but I value it less than my own. But the strangle, and she, her inner monologue continues as she tells her tale. But to strangle my throat, the fool released my wrist, and I struck for his life. The point of my dagger snapped on a metal buckle, but the jagged shard tore through doublet and shirt, plowing along his chest. And you see the surprise in Etienne's face, like, God's Agnes. And then she pummels him with the handle of the dagger into the nose and shatters his nose. You see him say, oh, and he just collapses to the ground. He says, God, girl, would you slay me? And she goes, yes, and with a joyful heart. As she stands over him, blood all over her clothes, dagger in her hand. And Etienne's on his knees, and he looks up to her and he says, in God's name, girl, have mercy. Hold your hand in the name of the saints. I am not fit to die. And there's just a great drawing showing her eyes and just the intent there. And then she puts the dagger into the table and she reclines with her feet on it. And she goes, I'll take the silver at least. I've certainly more right to it than you. As for you, Etienne, you may have your life. It's too poor a thing to stain my hands. Go your ways. And again, I've been showing these to you, but I love to hold the books up anyway. It's part of the interaction for me. And you can see that just the second part of her tale is as harsh as the first one. Betrayal after betrayal, and she's just having to survive. Once we turn the page and we see Etienne on the ground, he says, I cannot rise. The room grows dark, Agnes. You've given me a bitter kiss. I die in sin. I've laughed at death, but now that it's upon me, oh God, I feared, Agnes. Don't leave me to die like a dog. She says, why should I not? I trusted your lying words of chivalry and honor. Pah! You would have sold me into slavery viler than a Turk's harem. And he goes, I know. My soul is blacker than the night that steals upon me. Call the innkeeper and let him fetch a priest. He's accepting his death. She goes, he has gone on some mission of his own. He stole out the back door and rode into the forest. He's like, he has gone to betray me to the Duke d'Alencon. Then he must have recognized me after all. I am indeed lost. And then you get back to her inner monologue, and she says, it came to me that it was because of my calling Etienne's name in the darkness of the room above that the innkeeper became aware of my false friend's true identity. So, if the Duke laid Etienne by the heels, it would be because of my unconscious betrayal, and like most country folk, I had only fear and distrust of nobility. And she helps Etienne up, and he's got his arm around her. She says, I'll take you then. Not even a dog shall fall into the hands of the law by my will. And Etienne says, you are God's blessing, Agnes, God's very blessing. And she says, "Your goddess are cruel," and then Etienne, "but let's be off." And thus ends part 2 of our tale. Now, I've said this so many times. The Dark Agnes origin story is so dark, it's so harsh, but it's such a good tale. I hope you guys are going to join me next week for part 3. Again, I think this middle part is an A plus all around. It's really setting up what's happening with Agnes, it's helping form her into the woman that she's going to become. And it's not only forming her, it's also forming Etienne, because he's learning things about himself and he's got some decisions he's going to have to make. And we're going to have to see how these two continue forward together. So there's a lot being set up here. I know this because I've read the whole tale many, many times. And it's being done quite well. Robert E. Howard was a master of spinning a tapestry. And these two together is something special. But her tale is dark. The truths that she has to learn along the way are all harsh truths. There's nothing light, there's nothing fun about what she's going through or what she experiences. And hers is just a tale of survival and her will to survive. And that is something that runs through most of the Robert E. Howard characters that I like, is just their will to survive no matter the circumstances. And it's just something great. But that's it for this week, guys. I hope you enjoyed the second part of the origin of Agnes de Chastillon, or Dark Agnes. And until next time, thank you for watching and keep it casual.